Television, it's influenced all our lives. Well, certainly those of us who were born since the second half of the 20th century. And depending on how old you are, you may or may not remember some of the big shows from the early years of television. Now, I was born in the 1960s, so I wanted to find out what the top shows of the 1960s were. Now, these are the top American shows. I don't know how they were chosen because I've asked artificial intelligence to sort them out for me. So if you know something that's been omitted from this list, or if you think that maybe the priority is wrong because they're given in no actual order, or if you disagree with something I say about one of these shows, you want to add in a show that you really loved and think deserves more attention. But anyhow, 10 top television shows from the 1960s from the United States of America. Number 1, The Ed Sullivan Show. Now, this was a variety show, began in 1948, ran through to 1971. 23 seasons and more than 1,000 episodes. And if that name, Ed Sullivan, rings a bell with you, even if you don't remember the man Ed Sullivan, you'll know that the Ed Sullivan Theatre was the theatre where David Letterman and now Stephen Colbert record their television shows. So there is a continuity of sorts there. Number 2, The Andy Griffith Show, a beloved sitcom about a small town sheriff. It began in 1960, ran until 1968, about over 8 seasons and 249 episodes. And if you remember Andy Griffith, you'll also remember that Ronnie Howard, latterly Ron Howard of Happy Days fame, and then big film director, he was the son of Andy Griffith's character in that show, and it created a lot of characters. Don Knotts was in it, and then another spin-off was Jim Nabors in Gomer Pyle, USMC. So you might remember at least one of those shows if you're of a certain age. Bonanza, a western about a wealthy ranching family, began in 1959, ran to 1973, 14 seasons, 431 episodes. The Red Skelton Show, a variety show starring Red Skelton, obviously, who's a comedian, well known and loved in the US at the time. It began in 1951, ran until 1971. 20 seasons, 700 episodes of bemusement. Barry Mason. This has been rebooted just recently, but this is the original Raymond Burr. Barry Mason, a legal series about a criminal defense attorney. It began in 1957 and ran until 1966, totaling 9 seasons, 271 episodes. And I remember reading somewhere, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that only once did Perry lose a case. There are defense attorneys out there who are envious, I'm sure. Gunsmoke, a long-running Western series, began 1955, ran until 1975. 20 seasons, 635 episodes. Then another Western, Rawhide, about a cattle drive crew, began in 1959, ran until 1966. 8 seasons, 217 episodes. So many Westerns. And what's interesting is we seem to have not a lot of Westerns after the 60s and 70s, but now recently we've got things like Westworld, which I guess is sci-fi but set in a Western series. We've got Yellowstone and its spin-offs, so the Western is back, baby. Bewitched, starring Elizabeth Montgomery, who was and still the subject of fascination on the internet, prurient fascination in many cases. Poor old Elizabeth, who is no longer with us. Anyhow, about a witch with a mortal husband, first played by 2 different characters, Dick Sargent and Dick York. And I don't know whether it was ever explained why he suddenly changed appearance partway through the series. Anyway, it ran from 1964 until 1972, over 8 seasons, 254 episodes. The Beverly Hillbillies, a sitcom about a poor family that strikes it rich and moves to Beverly Hills. Began in 1962, ran until 1971. 9 seasons, 274 episodes. Amazing characters, memorable characters. Jed Clampett, his daughter Ellie Mae, their grandmother Jethro, the ne'er-do-well. Now, I think nephew. Bizarre. Anyway, I remember it well. They moved into this big house. They knew very little about it. They used to call the pool the cement pond, and their neighbours was the bank manager, who was desperate to keep their clientele. Good, harmless fun, and it ran a long time. And last but not least, because this is something a little bit out of the ordinary, the Twilight Zone, a science fiction anthology series hosted by Rod Serling. Began in 1959, ran to 1964, 5 seasons and 156 episodes. And if you haven't seen episodes of the original Twilight Zone, you can discover them here on YouTube. And I suggest that you do so, assuming you're not breaking anybody's copyright, of course, because when you consider, even by today's standards, they're brilliant. But when you consider the time and place that they were made, it's quite extraordinary that the television went in that direction. Some quite classic stories there that you may not even necessarily identify with Twilight Zone, but you may have heard or read them or seen something very similar. That's it for the top 10 US shows from the 1960s. I'm going to be doing more of these videos covering off on US and British and maybe other parts of the world. So thanks for watching. If you have been, if you like this, subscribe. I'll be doing more television and pop culture videos, plus the usual potpourri here on my channel.